Welcome to everyone, both first-time listeners and those of you that have been listening in for our series on wisdom literature as we explore some of the greatest minds to ever walk the planet Earth and some of the most important philosophies, theories, and movements recorded in human history. Today, I have a feeling I may stir up a hornet's nest for some people, but if you would just humor me for 1 minute before we dive into it, I want to read a couple quotes to set the stage for what we're going to talk about this week. First of all, let me go biblical on you for just one very short 26-word quote. And yes, whether you are a Christian, atheist, Muslim, or whatever, this quote works for everyone. It's such a perfect shot to the bullseye of how to live, that if all of us would adhere to these words, the world would transform overnight. Yeah, literally, the world would transform overnight. So here it is. Quote, "You hypocrite, first, remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye." I think we should all just soak this in for just 1 minute, reflect, and truly consider it in our lives. Let me read it one more time. "You hypocrite, first remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye." This particular quote came from the book of Matthew, specifically Matthew 7:5, if you want to look it up. No, I don't want to go off too hard or too strong yet, but I mean, really, how frequently does society, do you and I, for that matter, just get obsessed and outraged and indignant about the actions, the comments online of other people and their decisions? Wow, we are so quick to judge, so quick to label someone else ignorant or some other label we choose to quickly and flippantly slap on somebody else, particularly online. You and I need to have a conversation about, most importantly, ourselves and how we can improve ourselves in our lightning bolt quick judgments that we jump to and we make about others, and how we can transform those judgments to be more self-reflective, to encourage self-growth and improve our wisdom. This week our discussion is on Stoicism and how you and I can completely flip that script on how we analyze, how we act, and how we live. You and I, we need to get better, and society does too. We can do this if we will stop and look at some of the very practical and very simple teachings from the great Stoic philosophers. But let me get back on track here real quick. I mentioned at the outset that I had two quotes. The second one is coming from Epictetus, a very famous Stoic philosopher, and his book, Enchiridion. So bear with me as I read this. It's a little bit longer one. Quote, "Some things are in our control, and others are not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever our own actions. The things in our control are by nature free, unrestrained, or unhindered. But those not in our control are weak, slavish, restrained, and belonging to others. Remember then that if you suppose what belongs to others is your own, then you will be hindered. But if you suppose that only to be your own, which is your own, then no one will ever compel you or restrain you. Further, you will find fault with no one or accuse no one. You will do nothing against your will. Work, therefore, to be able to say to every harsh appearance or circumstance, you are merely an appearance. And then examine it by those rules. which you have, and first and chiefly by this, whether it concerns known things which are in our control, or those things which are not. And if it concerns anything not in our control, be prepared to say that it is nothing to you. I don't know about you, but this is powerful for me. Let me think. If I could summarize this rather long quote, I would say it means stop worrying about things in this world that you don't control and turn all your attention to getting your mind right. As if you get your mind right, you will get your life right. Oh, and by the way, you are the only one responsible for this. 100%. No exceptions and no excuses. You know, if we look over the landscape of our society today, my goodness, what have we become? We have to find the guilty party, the person or the group that has caused us to not be exactly where we want to be in life. The oppressive patriarchy, race or gender or whatever. It just seems we have taken so many very complex problems and boiled them down to such silly, stupid, ignorant, political talking points and bullet points. We get riled up on just about everything all the time. Everything always is somebody else's fault. What happened to personal responsibility? Geez, almost nobody in any public sphere, in any public position, will admit they're wrong about anything. Unless, of course, they're getting bullied into a meager little apology by some cancel culture mob or something. Personal responsibility is something that is not in style right now at all. I think it's time for a change. I think our discussion today into Stoicism can maybe reorientate us a little bit towards taking some personal responsibility in our lives. Now, that does not mean that there's not social injustices every day. Heck, there have been social injustices since the beginning of time, and human beings have gathered in groups of more than two. There will always be social injustices. We do not live in heaven. We live on the planet Earth that is occupied by flawed creatures known as human beings. And if the data in the entire scope of human history holds, we're never going to create an equal, peaceful society ever. At least not anything that can persist for any serious length of time. Now, I don't consider myself a pessimist, but let's be real. There are amazing, honest, ethical people everywhere. I'm sure you know some. Maybe you know many. I hope you do. But likewise, the world is also inhabited by evil manipulators, power-hungry individuals, money-hungry aggressors, and racists. I mean, this is life. And to pretend otherwise is not being rational. But yet, you and I, we will not become our best selves in our lives and in our world and in our circumstances if rather than self-reflect on our own flaws and our own poor decisions and our own gaps and errors in critical thinking, we continue to try and blame someone, somewhere, somehow for just about everything. We will never get ahead, and the deep divisions that are seeping into society will continue to grow larger and larger if we fail to take adult personal responsibility. So this week, we take on maybe one of the more practical philosophies that we will touch on probably in our entire journey together, and that's called Stoicism. So let's get to it. As we've already talked about the philosophical schools in many of the prior episodes, we've talked about these philosophical schools that arose during the Greek periods, and And we've discussed many of them so far. And these philosophies, they do have at least two sides. The first side, as we've discussed, is the personal, emotional, and the psychological dimension of human experience that you and I have. We all have a personal side, an emotional, and a psychological dimension to who we are. Then we also have the second side, which deals with practical questions of how you and I should conduct ourselves in a civil society, the ethical actions that we should take. I could argue, and I already sort of argued this at the outset of discussion, that Stoicism is one of the most successful philosophies at addressing a very practical approach to both sides of this in how we should live our life. And Stoicism was powerful, and it lasted, and it had a number of followers for almost 500 years, longer than the United States of America has even been a country, until it was finally supplanted by Christianity after Rome Christianized, dominated the world. Stoicism for a while fell out of favor. It didn't disappear, but it lost some of its steam. The origins of Stoicism, they go all the way back to the 3rd century BCE, and when the followers of Zeno emerged. And if you go into the books and you join the Substack and subscribe to that in the show notes, you can read about Zeno and who he was and what he was all about. But you know what? I'm not interested. I shouldn't say interested, maybe the right word. I'm not going to focus this week about going deep into academic history on the evolution of Stoicism. I think in particular Stoicism is a functional philosophy. And all I really want to talk about today is some of the functional, practical applications of Stoicism. I want to give you something you can sink your teeth into, because I think you and I, and society for that matter, if we would just simply take Stoicism to heart, and I'm talking about just some basic concepts, we as a collective could literally change the entire world. But I don't want to go there just yet, because that's not what Stoicism, that's not where I want to go at its basic level. So first, let me just define the term. Stoicism at its core is a personal philosophy on life, a personal way to live life. And that's how we want to approach this topic. Not solving all the world's problems, but how to develop a personal philosophy in life. But you know, as I always mention, I hope that you'll go ahead and subscribe to that Substack page that's listed in the show notes, so you can go deep into the historical and read in depth for free, by the way, many of the great works of Stoicism from the big three of Stoicism. You know, we've covered quite a bit of ground already in our journey through the wisdom literature genre. And I was kind of reflecting this week as I was reading about Stoicism. Is there maybe one big idea or maybe just one concept that I can link into Stoicism that sort of transcends or kind of unites some of the greatest minds? And I'll rattle off some of the greatest minds just from my perspective. And again, we're going to experience a whole lot more as we move through the wisdom literature genre. But Jesus Christ, he's next on our list, by the way, next week. Hope you hang around for that one. Muhammad, we'll get to him as well. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. We already talked about those three. Nietzsche, definitely on board. Buddha, we're going to get to him. Rumi, John Locke, Voltaire, the Dalai Lama, to name some of the minds we've already discussed and others that we're going to discuss in the future. Is there maybe something that unites them all together? And I think there is one thing. And I think Stoicism just nails this concept and drives it home over and over and over again. So let me give you one more quick quote. This one from Rumi, who wasn't a Stoic, by the way, but rather he was a Persian poet, an Islamic scholar. He was even, to many, a Sufi mystic. We'll get to him later on. But because, you know, I think if we could say one thing that would unite nearly every single brilliant mind, it would be something like Rumi said when he said this, quote, "Yesterday, I was clever. so I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, so I'm changing myself. Period. End quote. I think that quote captures Stoicism to a T. I mean, let's be real. We can rage against climate change. We could rage against our government and the national debt. We could be furious about social justice issue after every social justice issue, gender and whatever injustice on the planet Earth that we want to. We can scream and we can yell and we can be frustrated at the Democrats or Republicans or the stupidity of this, that, or the other. And we can find enemies and we can find ignorance and we can find racism all over the place. And we can find that stuff everywhere, every single day of the week if we want to. There is no shortage of things to be mad and frustrated about, is there? But where is that going to get us, really, if you stop and think about it at the end of our lives? What do we fix? What do we improve by raging blindlessly at the machine, whatever machine you want to put as your target? I'll give you that answer. According to the Stoics, it will get you nowhere. Because according to the teachings of Stoicism, as social beings, the path to true happiness, or blessedness, as they often say in a lot of the text, is found in accepting the moment as it presents itself, by not allowing oneself to be controlled by the desire for pleasure, or by the fear of pain, or by using one's mind to understand the world and to fix the world and to do one's own part in nature's plan. And if we each do our own individual work, it ultimately brings us to working together and treating others fairly and justly as we encounter them. But we do this personally, moment by moment, thought by thought, in the world as it shows up for us. Forget about raging about people you don't know about, you don't know on social media. It's a waste of time. Forget about being furious about this voter or that voter or not voting or that Trump supporter or that Biden supporter not thinking like you do. And how could they ever have an opinion that doesn't mesh with mine? That is absurd. Stop being jealous or prideful at somebody's photoshopped and staged perfect life or perfect body on Instagram. It's a waste of time. Forget about protesting and screaming about any level of social justice. You're not saving the planet by screaming and calling people names online because they want to drive a gas-powered engine, but rather, and hear me on this, as it's a cornerstone to Stoicism, how about you live your life according to the dictates that you want the grand society of the world to live by? How about you get your own life in order first? Put your focus there. Fix that first. Then, maybe then, you can start looking bigger. Now, if you're thinking, I already got everything all figured out, and I already got all my life in order, it's time for me, in my greatness, to educate the masses. Well, I would direct you back to earlier episodes, especially maybe on Socrates, as here's a little thought for those of you so sure that you have it all figured out. Socrates, one of the greatest minds to live, said this, quote, "Those who think they know, don't. Those who know they don't, know." Maybe just ponder on that one for just a little bit. Shouldn't take you long if you consider you know everything. However, back to the Stoics. They would probably say to you, your entire life can be spent making sure you get your house in order and you keep your house in order. And as you develop and evolve and grow to the point that you live your life properly, ethically, responsibly, honestly. When you do this, and in doing that, you're going to positively impact not only your life, but every member of your family's life, all of your friends, all of your community, all your people you work with. And ultimately, that helps improve society at large. This is where the focus in your life needs to be, on yourself. This will be your contribution to changing society at large. Now, when we look at the philosophy of Stoicism, I guess you could call it, the big three of Stoicism, or the big names that stand out. And in our readings on the Substack page, I have links to all of the big three. I guess you could say the big three, sort of like, being from Florida here, when LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, they all got together down in Miami and formed the big three. They won a couple NBA titles. We have the big three of Stoicism. These are the three individuals that stand out, that if you want to go real deep into Stoicism, these are kind of the key figures. Zeno, of course, was the first, but I think these three really are the ones that are most often referred to Stoics today. The first one, his name is Seneca. He was a writer and he was a philosopher. The second one is Epictetus. He was a Roman slave, believe it or not, turned tutor and philosopher. And then number 3 was Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor and a senator. Now, something to note, and you probably even get this right out of the gate, something that's fascinating is that we have a writer, a poet, and then we have a slave, and we have an emperor. And all three of them from vastly, vastly different backgrounds, obviously, but yet all three of them teaching this philosophy of Stoicism and personal responsibility. And I want to point out, for one particular reason, that no matter where you come from, no matter what your financial, your societal, your racial situation, background might be, the fact remains that Stoicism worked for every one of us in all of our situations that we find ourselves. Now, a critical race theorist would just be aghast, maybe tumble over and pass out from such a comment, but that's the fact. We had a slave, a Roman slave, that became one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, and his history is fascinating. Epictetus was such an incredible individual, and you can read all about him on that Substack page. But now, once again, I do want to say this. Here's the disclaimer. Obviously, some people have an easier path to success than others. I mean, come on. That's a no-brainer. Just because you don't believe every tenet of critical race theory doesn't mean that automatically means you discredit everything. I mean, duh. That's just that oversimplification our society loves to throw around. Loves to paint everybody into a perfect box all the time, no matter how simple and uncomplicated and unnuanced that might be. But society's kind of programmed us, and even maybe myself, to give the disclaimer that I'm not denying that there are differences, that there are prejudices. People come from different financial backgrounds, and there are things that impact us in so many different ways and help give some people a leg up. Some people born into wealthy households. Some people are born really smart. Some people are born with disabilities or come from oppressive countries with little opportunity at all, or maybe even from an abusive family with addictions, etc., etc., etc. Newsflash, not everybody starts out at exactly the same place in life. And newsflash, there isn't any political government system or any philosophy that is ever going to set that exactly straight. But we're talking about the philosophy of Stoicism and what they believe. Heck, a Roman slave, he rose from nothing, literal nothing, to become a noted and brilliant philosopher. So all things are possible with the right drive, the right determination, and the discipline to push ahead. So these big three, they all look vastly different from where they came from. And I think that's refreshing. I think that's amazing. And I think it shows the power of this particular philosophy. So the way I'm going to approach explaining the characteristics of Stoicism, and I'm going to talk just about 5 practical characteristics. I think that's enough for our episode here today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read a short quote from some of the readings, and then I'll discuss how you and I can implement each of these Stoic characteristics into our lives. So let's just jump right into it. The first one, Marcus Aurelius said this, quote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Period. End quote. Here's the key. The world hits us from the moment we put our feet on the floor every single morning. The moment your feet hit the floor, your mind starts buzzing. Till the very second you lay back down to bed at night. You're thinking, you're moving, you're having emotions. It never stops. Sometimes our day goes easy. Some days it goes hard. Sometimes there's a bunch of crazy in it, and many people are saying, yeah, pretty much every day is like that. But sometimes there's boredom. Sometimes there's happiness. But whatever the situation, to the Stoic, anything that happens in this external world outside of your head, outside of your brain, outside of your thoughts, outside of your mind, it is something that you have no control over. Soak that in for just 1 second. You only have control over, basically, to the Stoic, one thing in your mind. It's your mind. You don't have control over anything else. That's the only thing that you need to focus on. Let me give you an example. I live in Tampa, Florida. Anybody who's been to Tampa, Florida knows the traffic, well, how do I say it nicely, sucks. I mean, it can be downright brutal. You ask somebody from Tampa how far it is to something that's 15 miles or 5 miles away, they'll pretty much say 30 to 40 minutes all the time because, well, you can't get anywhere, it doesn't seem, in less than a half hour, anywhere in this crazy city since it's just exploded in growth. Now, I'm not the calmest human being on the planet Earth. Anyone who knows me knows this to be true. If you're not excited, you're not invited, sort of, in my world in so many different ways. And if I'm not careful as I'm driving through Tampa traffic and I get cut off, or people sit too long at the light that turns green, or drive extra slow in the left-hand lane on the interstate, oh my goodness, I can lose it. But you know, a Stoic philosopher would lecture me on this. And he would remind me that I have no control over the traffic around me. What I do have control over is my mind and my reaction to the things that are going on around me. So what a Stoic would tell me is maybe chill out. The only thing I have control over are those thoughts and my control over those thoughts and emotions that are inside my mind. So, if you or I want to reach a higher level of intellect, demonstrate more wisdom, self-control, discipline, honesty, ethical behavior, we have to let go of all the external world around us. Yes, I did say all, as in everything in the external world, because to the Stoic, you don't control it and you're never going to control it. I mean, we like to think that we're in control of certain things outside of our mind, but we are not. We're never going to control our spouse. You're never going to control your job. You're never going to be in control of the weather. You're never going to be in control of anything outside of your brain. I mean, I think you get it now, right? Does that sound harsh and does that sound kind of cold and practical? Yeah, it is a little harsh. Yes, but, you know, at the end, it is a fact. That crazy political ideologue person in your life. I mean, they could be far left. They could be far right. You may be thinking they're so far left or far right, they're falling off. But you can't change their position. You can't change their opinion, so you need to let it go. It's beyond your control. Let me say that again. Let it go. If we stop and think about it, there's incredible freedom in this. I always marvel. You hear these stories about people afraid to go home for a holiday or to engage in any conversation. There's people that I know in my life that you just have to stop having that conversation. There's people I've tried to have conversations about politics and it doesn't work. And it leads a circular firing path to nowhere. So you got to let it go. It does feel a little vulnerable. But anytime we think we control anything in the external world, whether it be a person or a thing, it can lead to anger, frustration, doubt, and fear. The fact is we don't control the external world, and we never will. We only control what's in our mind. I mean, really, think about it. You can eat absurdly healthy, which I do. You can exercise every day, which I do. You can do all the right things for your body, which I do. But, I could get killed in a car accident tomorrow. I mean, it sounds morbid, but or I could get a rare disease no matter what, because I don't control, nor do you, the external world. The Stoic would say, once you understand this, you have freedom. And you know why you have freedom in this? Because that's just as important as understanding the concept. Because you now can focus on your own mind and the things you do in your control inside your head. So your reaction to every situation that you ever encounter in the real world is in your control. It's in your own brain. That's powerful. The second characteristic I want to talk about comes from a quote from Seneca, and he said this, quote, "Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. We've been using them not because we needed them, but because we had them," end quote. Okay, here's a jab at the materialistic world that you and I live. And I'm sure Seneca had no clue whatsoever what a modern American materialism would end up being like. He would probably be so stunned it's hard to even fathom. But let's be real for 1 second. Just, how can I say this politely? Americans, in general, we're soft as marshmallows. We're soft as marshmallows. What we think we need versus what we actually need has a Himalaya-sized mountain between the two. Stoicism tells us on the things that we actually, to focus on those things that we actually need. We do not actually need a new iPhone the second the latest version comes out. We do not actually need to spend $400,000 to go to college when you can go somewhere for $40,000 or $50,000. You do not actually need a brand new car every third year. You do not need to have a $7 latte every single day on your way to work. You do not need to eat in a restaurant 4 days a week. This life of ease, this life where we go online to Amazon, order something and expect it to be at our door within 24 hours is not something that we need. We need to shift our focus away from all the soft, nice, fluffy things in life. Because then we begin to appreciate the most important things. After we appreciate the more important things in life more and more, our brain sharpens and refines. Iron sharpens iron. And when we adjust to what we actually need, it will allow us to grow to levels that our soft, materialistic world will not let us grow. We must control our mind, our yearnings, our things we just have to keep up with the Joneses, or just because we're soft and lazy. No, we need to get control of that. So how about you and I start to get a little bit more mature and focus our energy where it actually needs? and spend less time focusing our energy on silly, superficial wants. I think it'll make a big difference intellectually, spiritually, physically. Number 3, Marcus Aurelius said this, quote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to faint, to enjoy, to love," end quote. Full disclosure here, I'm very guilty of this. I'm always trying to forecast, project, risk assess the future. Sort of drives my wife crazy. Sometimes I very rarely live in the moment. I tend to not appreciate the moment. And it's easy to fall into a funk when you live this way. You probably know what I'm talking about. You wake up in the morning. Did you think, oh no, another day, back to the grind, new day, same crap, another day. Worries and stresses and obligations start to weigh on you the second you wake up. I mean, I get it. The Stoic, on the other hand, would wake up with energy and happiness and a lust to take on the moment. And that's powerful. I know I need to work on this. Maybe you do too. Number 4, Seneca said, quote, "The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately, period," end quote. The human brain is such a fascinating thing. If I were to ask you, or even better, if I could hook a computer printer up to your brain that recorded every single thought that passed through your mind in a day, the thousands and thousands of fleeting thoughts, and I start reading that computer printout, what would it look like? First off, many of you would probably say, no way is anybody going to read that computer printout ever, never. Well, all joking aside, your mind, the human mind, can only be in one of 3 places at any given moment. You can be thinking about the past, the present, or the future. That's it. Where do you suppose most humans spend their time thinking? It's an interesting question. Well, I can tell you where most adult humans don't spend their time thinking, and that's in the present. Most adults will spend most of their time thinking of the past things that have already happened or the future worries of what's to come. We fixate on things that happen to us. It's natural. The brain, it has a goal to protect us and keep us alive. So it's constantly in a state of trying to keep you safe, keep you comfortable. But you know, if you fixate constantly on the things that happened to you in the past, bad things that happened to you when you grew up, failures, abuses, horrible things that happened, well, this can impact your present and stop you from being your best self. One of the most disgusting things about the news media is that they feed our fears of the future. And when we're worried about what's coming up, when we're worried about war, politics, the environment, school, work, the economy, or whatever, these fears can literally prevent us from living in the present moment. So the Stoic says one of the most dangerous things in life is for the mind to stay focused on either the past or the future, because it prevents us from living today to the fullest. And today is literally all each of us have. You know, you and I, we're talking right now, and I hope you're in the present and you're hearing this episode as we go. But the fact is, there's no guarantee we're both going to be here tomorrow or next week for the next episode I have. And I hope you and I are together next week. I hope we're both here. But the fact is, we only have this moment right here that's right now that's guaranteed to us. Nothing else is guaranteed. Here's an example of being present focused. You ever watch a child? Maybe you have young children now, or maybe you have grandkids playing with toys. And you know when they're sitting there and they're playing, and they call you down and they say, "Come play with me," and you watch them. I mean, they are all in. They are 100% dialed in the present. They just want to live that moment. And when you watch them play, it is with 100% energy and effort. You know the sad thing? As we get older and we begin to experience the slings and arrows of life, and we get scarred, and we get scarred over and over again, all of a sudden our mind starts to shift from that childlike love of things. By the way, that's another thing with an animal. If you have a dog, for example, and you lay down a nice juicy steak in their food bowl for their birthday, you know what a dog's not going to do? The dog's not going to say, I think what I'm going to do with this steak, it's my birthday, but I think I'm just going to eat half of it today, and I'm going to save the rest for one of those days when they don't bring my food on time. No, of course not. They're going to live that moment. They're going to eat that whole thing up right away. But we lose that ability to enjoy the present moment. But I want to guarantee you something when I ask you this question. If I would ask you, if you and I are sitting across from the table together, and I would ask you, what's the greatest moment that ever happened in your life? What's the greatest moment of your life? I can guarantee you of one thing. That you were not worrying about the past. You were not fearing the future. You were 100% dialed in to that present moment. Maybe it was the time you won the championship game. Maybe it was a concert you went to. Maybe it was just an achievement. You would work months and months and you got over the hill and the reward was right there and you got your flowers or trophy or your whatever. Whatever that moment was. Maybe it was a moment you had your first child. I don't know what it was, but I can guarantee you that greatest moment of your life, you were dialed into the present. See, the Stoic challenges us to keep our mind, as much as we possibly can, dialed into the present moment and the present task that's in front of us. And now, number 5, the last characteristic that we're going to talk about today. Seneca said, quote, "No one is to be found who is willing to distribute his money. Yet among how many does each one of us distribute his life? You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last." End quote. Let me ask you another question. What's the most important asset that you have? Well, many people would think it's something financial. Maybe it's their home, maybe it's their car, maybe it's their 401k. I don't know what it is. Whatever financial thing you would say, it would be wrong. Money's transitory. Material things are transitory. They're here today. They're gone tomorrow. We're already learning this over and over again in our march through the wisdom literature. You hear so many different philosophers say this, and it's maybe one of the most obvious universal truisms. And, sure, I would rather have more money than less money. I mean, don't get me wrong. But to the Stoic, money is nothing without time. To the Stoic, time is your one and only asset, and you should treat it like the greatest treasure and the greatest love of your life, because once it is gone, the game is over and nothing else matters. So the Stoic would warn you that you best use your time wisely to the best of your ability for however long you live. How many people have faced a horrific tragedy or a sudden death of a loved one? Nearly to a T, they all feel like the rug was just ripped out from under their feet. I mean, those sudden deaths, which I hope you've never had to experience, but many of you surely have. That's a gut punch, right? That's a rip your heart out moment. Why? Because you were not expecting it. You thought you had more time. You thought you would be able to do X, Y, or Z someday down the road with that person. You thought you'd make things right. You thought you'd reconnect. You had some things that you would have just loved to say, but you just never took the time to do it, or just spend more time with someone. And then when time is taken away violently, and there's nothing you could do to stop it because it's external, then and only then do you fully appreciate how significant time in the present moment is. The Stoic wants to remind you right here, right now, that you don't have time to waste. So whatever it is that you need to get done, that person you need to reconnect with, that task you've always wanted to perform, that whatever, well, you best get on with it now. Don't wait for a New Year's resolution next month, next week, next year, next whatever, because you're not promised any of that. If Seneca or Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus were here, they would tell you, live out your day to the best of your ability today. Don't wait. Live now, as there is no promise for the future. So there you have it. 5 characteristics. Number 1, you only have power over your mind, not the external world or other people. Number 2, focus on what you need, not what you want. Shun all that fluffy materialistic stuff. It isn't necessary and it mucks up your focus and makes you soft. Number 3, treasure the present moment because the world is just full of uncertainty. Number 4, train your brain through monitoring your self-talk to focus on the present moment. Number 5, a Stoic never chases money or materialism. It's transient and it won't last. So keep your focus on the present. So there you have it. This talk is actually pretty hard. You know, the hardest thing about personal responsibility is the cause of your problems is the person staring at you in the mirror when you wake up. But you know, on the positive side, the solution to all your problems is also the person staring at you in the mirror in the morning. It's hard to not try and blame others, to make excuses, to justify stuff by finding it some evil enemy somewhere out there. The really hard thing is to look inside. So if there ever was a philosophy of personal responsibility, it's Stoicism. And let's face it, I think our world needs a healthy dose of personal responsibility. I know for me, I get so tired of the blame game, the pointing fingers and yelling and screaming and oversimplification of things. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to get going on the oversimplification of incredibly complex problems and the villainization of people or groups of people. I mean, sure, there's a whole lot of blame to spread around a whole lot of people over a whole lot of years, over a whole lot of complex problems that have put us in the state of affairs we are in today. But the world is a very complex, sophisticated organism that can't be solved with oversimplifying and blame gaming. So Stoicism, it teaches us, get yourself right first. Get yourself right first before you start throwing rocks at somebody else's house. Remember that quote from the book of Matthew? You hypocrite. First, remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today, and please go back to the show notes. Click on the link to subscribe to the Substack page. It's free. I don't want your money. I'm not going to send you a bunch of stuff, and you're going to gain access to these resources so that you can take a deeper look than I can ever go in one of these talks on Stoicism or any of the talks for that matter. So you can read, study, ask me questions over the material we cover. It's all about intellectual growth. So you're encouraged to come along the journey with me as we go through all recorded history. Yes, we are going through all of recorded history, reading through the wisdom literature. I'm just so excited about this, and even now, and I mean, we're a bunch of episodes into this, but I'm learning so much along this. You know, I have a doctorate in the humanities, but I learn something every single week as I even prepare and deliver these episodes. So I hope you're getting some value out of it too. But until next week, we take on Jesus Christ. Wow, what a powerful, powerful figure. And I don't want to scare anybody off with that, whether you're an atheist, Muslim, whatever. Every life perspective is going to get its fair play throughout all of this wisdom literature genre. And I can't wait to take our next step together. But for now, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and talk to you again very soon.